Welcome to another episode of I Took Your Point podcast. I am John Dunson, joined by my lovely co-host, Miss Lynn. You guys call her other things, but I refer to her as Miss Lynn. That said, hopefully you guys are having a great day wherever you may be joining us from. If you're not already subscribed to I Take Your Point podcast, please be so kind as to listen, like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'd love to have you join. That said, we're going to jump in. It's a busy day. We've got a lot to cover, and I know that Lynn is itching to get on someone's nerves today. I want to start with the question of what is the most expensive thing you pay for, we pay for every month? Some of you are thinking your mortgage, some of you thinking rent, car payments, student loans, insurance. I don't think that's actually the most expensive thing most people pay for, because there's a bill most of us pay every single day that never shows up on the statement, no invoice, no receipt, no monthly reminder. And because no one sends a bill for it, most of us never notice we're paying it. We just assume that's how life works now. Let me give you an example. Imagine your car breaks down. 30 years ago, there was a decent chance you knew someone. Lynn knew that shade tree mechanic you could call, or because she considers herself a semi-MacGyver, she'd probably be the one trying to fix it herself. It could have been a cousin, it could have been a neighbor, it could have been a church member, it could have been a guy on the block, someone who knew somebody. You made a phone call. But today, most of us have Google. We'll go to reviews, we'll go to ratings, we'll go to forums, we'll do the price comparison, and then we'll get 3 estimates. We'll get the background research, we'll get the consumer reports, and we'll spend an hour trying to figure out who can be trusted before we spend 10 minutes solving the actual problem. And that's interesting because the repair isn't the first problem anymore. The first problem is uncertainty. Now think about how many parts of life work that way. You got to find a contractor, you're hiring an employee, you're choosing a doctor, you're picking a daycare, you're starting a relationship, you're joining a gym, you're buying a used car, you're reading the news. Everything starts with verification. Everything starts with research. Everything starts with reducing risk. And after a while, you stop noticing how much work that is because everybody else is doing it. But here's the thing. That work didn't always exist, or at least not on the scale that we're now looking at it. Where I grew up in rural South Carolina, we knew someone who could do pretty much anything. So we would make a phone call, whether we had a cousin, a brother, a sister, an uncle, someone could do it. And we trusted that they would get it done decently well. Now, sometimes, obviously, we'd have to go back and get it redone, but we knew someone and we could make that call because those relationships existed. And the communities that formed those relationships existed. And the institutions that formed those communities existed. If somebody recommended a contractor, that recommendation meant something. If a person had a good reputation, that reputation traveled. If a company hired you, there was an assumption that both sides were trying to make the relationship work. Now, if a neighbor needed help, the answer wasn't always a platform. It wasn't an app or a paid service. Sometimes it was just a favor. Now, before anyone says anything about romancing the past, we're not doing that. We're not romanticizing the past. That's not what this episode is about. The past had problems, plenty of them. Individuals took advantage of us. People got scammed. All of us have been in situations where we've done something for a family member and that came back to bite us in the ass. People got cheated, institutions lied, and trust was abused. We're not talking about whether or not the old system was perfect. It wasn't. We're talking about something different. We're talking about what happened after trust started disappearing. Because once trust disappears, the need doesn't disappear. The cost just moves. And so the biggest story is this. When Miss Lynn is going about her day and trying to find out who has the best mud tea, she can't call her girlfriend and say, hey, girl, what mud tea are you drinking? Or can I get your recommendation? We don't do that anymore. She goes to either OnlyFans or wherever it is she gets her information from, and she does her research. And based on that research, she will make a decision. So today, we're going to talk about the trust tax and what that means and how the collapse of that trust is costing us a price that we're paying for with respect to the other things that we're depending upon. But before we do that, let me again welcome my wonderful co-host into the forum. Why is it that you're looking like you're in a towel, like you just got out of a sauna or a spa?
It feels like a sauna in here. It is extremely warm and humid in the great state of Texas, and especially in this room. So, yes, I'm in a sauna, John.
How? Okay. Anyway, the first receipt in terms of culture, where people stopped asking. When you used to pick up a phone and used to call, and you could say, hey, I have this particular issue that's going on with my house, and I know you've done this before, I have a ceiling fan that I need installed, or I have a leak that I need fixed. You would walk down the street and show a little leg and obviously get individuals to fix things for you. But there are also individuals who will pick up their phone, go to Google search, go to My Door or Next Door, and they do the research to determine if I have a leak, if I have a lawnmower that will not start, if I have a tree limb that needs to be cut down. You no longer have those relationships with the neighbors that would allow us to do that. So the question I have for you is this. When Ms. Lynn is looking to do certain things and get certain things fixed, when did you last ask someone to do something for you? Not hire someone, but you asked them to do something for you without a monetary consideration being an issue.
Can I use my family member?
Sure.
Great. So I used the guise of my dad coming here and then flying to Arizona to drive back with my son. While he was here, I had him fix the lawnmower, the fence, and a couple of other projects.
So you use your dad as a handyman?
I use my dad as the real MacGyver.
Okay, so let's assume that your dad, who lives a couple states away, let's assume that he wasn't available to come in and fix those things. If you had a fence that needed repair, if you had a leaky faucet that needed someone to come in and do it, how would you go about getting those things done?
Well, first off, I would call him and ask him, do you think I can do this? And if he says, yeah, you can do it. And he would say, yes, baby girl, you can do it. And then he would walk me through it. I would never try and work on my car because no, and I don't do plumbing, and I do a little bit of electric work, but not a lot. So to answer your question, there was a time when I would ask my sister or my mother if they knew someone. Obviously, I don't make those interpersonal connections where I would know people. So I would have to rely on them because they do make those interpersonal connections and they knew everyone. At this age and this stage, I'll ask my mom, hey, do you know anybody that can fix blah, 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 blah? Actually, I don't. And so there was a time when I would go on our neighborhood next door or Facebook and say, hey, I need someone to do whatever. I have a lot of negative experiences. And as you were talking...
Hold on, negative experiences with going on neighborly or whatever it is you're going?
Yeah, I have. And so let me unpack that for you. You were talking a little bit about, during your opening, about people having to go back in and fix things. I think that's a big deal because right now money isn't the way that it used to be, where we can just throw money away. Jobs are tight, income is tight. We're in a situation where we have to be very careful and aware of the dollars that we spend. So I don't have the bandwidth and the flexibility to try somebody out. I would rather spend extra money and make sure they're bonded, licensed, whatever. In the event something goes wrong, I have repercussions and I don't have to go back in and hire somebody else to fix whatever because I don't really know them like that. And even if I did, I still want the credentials because I want to be able to recoup any costs that are associated with doing work that's not up to par.
I get what you're saying, and I understand that the problem is that the calculation that you're making is that your monetary outlay in terms of asking someone who's a licensed professional to do it exceeds or supersedes the relationship that you would form by developing those relationships within your community with friend groups that you can then rely on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so there's a risk involved with that. So am I willing to make that risk when it comes to my hard-earned dollars? Not at this stage, I am not.
But the assumption in your calculation is that you have the dollars to pay for it. If you don't, then you have to bargain. If Lynn has the margin, and we talked a couple months ago about margin, Lynn has the margin, and I'm the same way, so I'm not faulting you here. I can say either I can spend the equity in terms of developing a relationship with my neighbor to go out and do a job that's 60% okay, 65% okay, is passable, or I can spend $1,000 to hire an expert to get it, and so it's 90% passable. And so if something happens, then I have that recourse and sue him or have him redo it. Whereas Lynn may not feel comfortable, or John may not feel comfortable going back over to my neighbor Todd and say, Todd, you did a shitty job in putting up this lighting and putting up the sheetrock. because then that risks damaging a relationship.
Well, also, Todd or whomever this neighbor is, he or she or they also did it at a discount. And so you essentially assume and absorb that risk. Because if you're going to pay Todd in peaches as opposed to $1,000, then you may get peaches work. And so,
well, it depends on the, if you're in Georgia and we Georgia peaches. I mean, it could be.
Texas also has peaches. There's Fredericksburg. So
no, the peaches could be an acronym for something else. It could be a metaphor for
John,
something else.
I need you to focus.
I mean, you're talking about giving Todd peaches.
Well, you said barter.
Well, are you bartering your services to Todd?
Well, what else do I have, John? What do you want? Todd, what do you want?
Well, Todd can probably say, hey, couple nights a week.
Oh, wow, Todd. Todd, I'd rather spend $1,000. Thanks. Anyway, John, so let's just make sure that I understand the scenario. Are you saying in this scenario, I have financial constraints? And
I mean, it's not you, but research tells us that most people don't have access to $1,000.
But that's not how you set this up at the beginning.
What I said was, because we know, and maybe you're the wrong person to ask this because I know how you feel about relationships. If you're not developing those relationships that would allow you, your mom and your sister did, they invested in those relationships so that if they needed
someone. It wasn't because if they needed, that's not why they invested in the relationship.
Okay, they invested in relationships because that was something that they enjoyed doing. And those relationships had benefits. Those benefits accrued to them if something happened, then they needed to rely on those individuals. You, being the hermit that you are and being the Black Karen that you are, you go and you accost Assad and you piss everyone off at the Costco. And so when something breaks, you have no choice but to spend money because you don't have friends that you could call that could come in and fix it up other than, the individuals.
I'm feeling triggered. First, this racism, this colorism, and this isolationism. I'm feeling triggered, John.
You just isms. Okay, so I guess the question becomes, did the fact that you do not want to impose your issues on someone else, you'd rather write the check and be done with it, as opposed to owing someone something?
I don't like to owe anybody anything. So that's number one. I have a big problem. My mom gets mad at me. I've had this happen a couple of times. And so this happens to my mom and my sister all the time, that they could be out and someone's like, I'd like to pick up your groceries or your dinner. And it's happened to me. I remember one distinct time it happened in New York, and I was with my sister-in-law, and this guy was like, I'm paying, or they said, he's already paid for your food. I went to him and I confronted him. Why? Why did you pay for my food? Mm-hmm. And so I think he got scared, but I felt like, how dare you pay for my food? Do I look poor to you? I can pay for my own food. And my mom said, you are blocking someone's blessing. And I'm just not, I always question if somebody does something nice for me. Like, why are you doing this? What do you want? Because I'm not going to give you peaches or herb. I'm not giving you anything.
Oh, so well, look at you. Peaches. Well, look at you.
I know, reunited, baby.
Peaches.
I'm just not, I am always, I guess, suspicious of why somebody would do something, even if I would do it, but I know my motives. And then the other thing is, I don't want to owe you anything because you may want to come back and say, hey, can you help me move? And I'm like, it's hot, so I'd rather not help you. Or do you want to go out to dinner? I don't want to do that. I don't want to do anything. So I would just rather live on this island with my silk eye mask and my bottled water and sunscreen and not do those things.
Okay, that answers so much. Receipt number 2. Last week, I happened to walk downstairs on the main floor of my house, and there was water all over the floor. And so we had a water main break. And so I'm going through the process of getting that fixed right now. One of the things that was interesting for me was going through the homeowner's insurance. And I think the call may have gone out to the insurance company at 8. By 9 o'clock, I had contractors calling me saying that they were recommended by my contractor. I said, well, first of all, I don't have a contractor yet. I haven't determined a contractor yet. Well, we got your information from this insurance company and such is your adjuster, right? I said, yeah. So here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to call me, and we're not going to pretend that you were recommended by someone to come in and do work that we haven't determined yet need to be done. So the second receipt is the reputation doesn't travel anymore. And I say that to say, whether you're submitting a resume for a job, whether you are a contractor recommendation, or whether you're talking about a professional recommendation inside of an organization, it used to be that person or those people that were calling me felt that I'm going to call him and I'm going to drop the name of a contractor who recommended me, and that's going to be the vetting. And because he is in a headspace, or they're in a headspace right now, they're going to say, "Oh, I'm so glad that someone is here to help me fix the problem." We're not there anymore. We're not there in terms of you reaching out to me because Lynn had you on her preferred contractor list. Lynn is still going to do her vetting. So your resume or that recommendation is no longer what it is that stops a conversation from happening. It's not the start and the end of the conversation. So the question I have for you, I want you to think about that time where you've had your most important opportunities. And let's think about a job. How many of them came through the formal process versus how many of them came with relationships you already knew where people could be a door opener?
I think half and half, actually. So I think that in education, it's more relationship. In technology, it's more skill set, resume, project based. And so I didn't necessarily use anyone to open a door for me when I was in tech. When I went to education, it was more relationship, and you needed to know someone in order to get that opportunity. So I think it depends on the industry that you're in, or at least it did for me.
So when I think about it, I think about this way. Most jobs, at least at the executive level for the most part, are relationship oriented, meaning that Lynn has a skill. Someone has worked with Lynn and they can vouch for her to say that she is going to be a good person, for this particular role, for this particular company. And so that reputation that you've developed with that individual typically travels with you and allows them to use or to vouch for you with respect to getting in a company. And I think about it this way with respect to executive leadership again. Typically, when you go into an organization as an executive leader, the first thing you want to do is you want to surround yourself with your people. And sometimes that means that the people that are already there, that are in roles, you want to assess them and see whether or not they have the skills that can do what it is that you need for them to do. And if they don't, you want to bring in individuals who have skill sets that can make your job easier for you to get accomplished what you need to accomplish. I think we're at this interesting point, especially as minorities. We don't get a lot of opportunities. Lynn submits a resume. Someone saw Lynn's resume on LinkedIn, or someone saw Lynn's resume through the ATS system. And all of a sudden you see the match and she's a 95% match in terms of this job. We're going to call her in and give her an opportunity. Those days are pretty much long gone with the bots and everything else going on with respect to the hiring process. So I would argue that it is more about relationships to be able to get opportunities with respect to either jobs or with respect to a contract if you are a contractor.
Well, some people are not willing to extend that political capital to vouch for you. I was thinking about this as you were talking, and we talked about risk management. And I think that because there's a couple of things that could be at play. First, the scarcity of jobs, and people are trying to protect their own job. So if you were to vouch for someone and that person came in and they did a subpar job, that could be a reflection on you. I don't know if people are willing to take that risk. And so if it's someone that you worked with, but you didn't have a close personal relationship, like you didn't know all facets of their life, you can also say that their resume or the credibility that you built with it is not the same thing as trust. Like, I just don't trust you to that degree where I am willing to put my reputation and potentially my career growth on the line for someone that I worked with. Maybe I worked with them on a project once, or I saw them in the break room. I think that it's challenging to always rely on those relationships, because those relationships are not always available. And you talked about some of the repercussions and people that could be impacted by that. And I do think that it's a lot of underrepresented groups, because we already have biases that are associated with us. Extending yourself out to someone that you just really don't know, it unfortunately to some people puts you in that same category. I was just watching Reasonable Doubt, and I'm not going to ruin anything for anybody, but there was a storyline in there that I was just fascinated with. And we had talked about, hiring people that look like us and giving people an opportunity. But when that person comes in and they abuse that opportunity, it reflects poorly on you. And we already have struggles in the workplace as it is.
You mentioned technology and you mentioned relationships. And I'm thinking about individuals who don't live a life that's on a platform. Lynn has a skill set that she's developed over a number of years. And if she's fortunate enough and she's savvy enough, then that skill set is represented on a platform like a LinkedIn.
But that still speaks to the credibility. So you have the credentials. You can go back to Dr. Cheyenne, what's her name? Cheyenne Bryant.
But if you don't put it on, hold on. But if you don't put it on the platform, then the individuals use the platform to vet. So the first thing that you do, or first thing that people will do, is if they get a name, they will go to the Better Business Bureau, they'll go to Glassdoor, and they will go and they will vet what that information is. If you don't have that digital footprint, then they're going to go, well, can I trust that this person really has the expertise?
But you can't trust even if they put those credentials up there. You just talked about Dr. Bryant.
Yes.
And so she has all the credentials. Does she? And so I think that people, even though we have so many ways to verify if people have these skill sets, the references, their LinkedIn portfolios, certifications, the social profiles, the assessments, the AI screening, but there's still this disconnect with trust.
Yeah.
So you can verify the competence, but you cannot automate faith in another human being.
Okay, so let's think about how it is that we get that information. And we get that information through, in a lot of ways, subscriptions. And so the third receipt is the subscription replace the relationship. What that means is this. Lynn used to, if she had a tree that needed removed, she would call to have someone remove it. Or if she needed moving, she'd call someone that she knew to help cut the tree down. If she needed moving help, she'd call someone to help with respect to her moving her girlfriends. If she was doing something with respect to trying to work through problems, maybe now she's calling a therapist and relying on that therapist instead of talking to her girlfriends about it. Individuals used to get together to possibly cook a meal. Now you have the meal delivery services and things of that sort. So the subscription to all those things replace relationships that we'd formed with respect to interacting with each other. So the question I have for you is this. If you look at your subscription list, what's on your subscription list that used to be handled by a relationship? And when did that switch happen?
The only thing that I ever relied on relationships, like not outside of my family, it was always inside the family, even, childcare.
Mm-hmm.
Me, my sister, and my mom arranged our work schedule so that the boys never had anybody outside of the three of us watching them. And so I just am reluctant first to ask for anyone to come in because, again, I don't trust them. And so you're definitely not going to be around my kids. And the other thing, I think that for me with subscriptions, I can't remember a time where you would go and like if you ran out of some sugar or something, you would go to your neighbor like, oh, can I borrow a cup of sugar? I mean, I only did it because I wanted to meet the cute guy next door.
Wow.
But let's just say as an adult, I ran out of sugar or some eggs or something. And I would say, hey, can I borrow an egg? I couldn't imagine me going to my neighbors and asking that. However, I will say that in our little community here, there are so many times where people will ask for that. They will ask for help. I remember during COVID, there would be store runs. Hey, I'm going to the store. Do you need anything? And then you would just leave it on their porch.
So let me ask you this. That's a great example. COVID and what we saw with how individuals in a lot of ways turned back the clock on how things used to be because technology was stripped down and we could not do certain things. I mean, if you think about entertainment, we all came together for the verses, at least most of us. And that was a community thing, especially for the culture. So when you think about COVID and you think about individuals spending more time cooking or grilling, in my case, we did more of that in that year than we had done in maybe 6 or 7 years combined. In a lot of ways, COVID allowed us to rediscover parts of us that we'd thrown away and develop relationships and trust on neighbors than we hadn't done before. The other thing that happens when a natural disaster happens, neighbors start depending on each other, whether you're without lights or you're without water. I was thinking about a colleague of mine who was in Houston when they had some horrific incident. As a community, they came together as a block. They started doing things together as a block. And so from that standpoint, again, it's developing relationships. Know that you like to be by yourself and do a lot of things on your own, but community is important.
But I think it's interesting that you presented it that way. Because when I think about COVID, there were some things where we did things, but we did more isolation. And I don't think that COVID created the isolation, but I do think it could have institutionalized it. And the reason why I'm saying that is that
people had COVID pods.
Well, okay, but here's the thing though. We learned to view people as threats to our health. And so we did a lot of things on our own. And so the casual interactions like at church or coffee shops or school or anything like that, those things went away, right? And then people stopped dropping by your house unannounced. They're just not coming over here. And so I think that even after the restrictions ended, some of the habits of separation remained.
I will say this. COVID damaged a lot of relationships because one of the questions that you asked people was, are you vaxxed? Because that would determine whether or not you were going to hang with those individuals. And if these individuals hadn't been vaxxed, then it was like, well, Mima has pre-existing conditions. And you have to make certain that you're not around individuals that are not vaxxed for whatever reason.
It accelerated some of the things that we were already doing. And COVID was something where people just really went inward. They were very careful.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they were very careful about who they connected. I didn't have pods. Okay. We would do Zoom meetings and meet up with our girlfriends and like, okay, let's have virtual drinks or do whatever and play games. But we weren't trying to hang out with people. Like I wasn't hanging out with anybody.
I'm not saying hanging out, but I remember during COVID, we had some work that had to be done to the house. And I remember a guy, I'm not going to call him a redneck, but he would be called a redneck in some circles. So he got off of his truck. And I was adamant that you wore a mask. So he got out of his truck and he was getting ready to walk toward my house. And I was like, hey, dude, mask. And he gave me this look like, how dare you? And I was like, okay, either mask or no work.
It's the same with me. And I don't allow shoes in my house, especially upstairs. And because a lot of people...
We're talking about Todd making this 2 times a week visit. So he had to take off his shoes before he goes upstairs.
He can get peaches outside. At any rate, some people feel uncomfortable telling people. So I just put a cute little note on the door. We think your visit is sweet. We do not think the shoes on your feet or whatever the little rhyme is. And so I have little booties for them to wear if they're working in the house. And that way they just know up front. There's no question, there's no whatever. But I'm not going to compromise my health or anything like that because you feel inconvenienced.
And that's a great setup for politics because you talked about the fact that there's certain things that you had to put in terms of guardrails. The first receipt for politics is every trust failure becomes a permanent process. So we think about 9/11 and how that changed how we got on airplanes. We think about post-Enron and how that impacted Sarbanes-Oxley and how it is that certain things were reported. We think about the procurement process in terms of no bid contracts, which apparently is now back in the news because every damn thing that we're doing in this administration is a no bid contract. I mean, you got the reflecting pool that's full of algae and he's blaming it on Lynn going in.
That's not their fault. That's vandals.
Yes, vandals are going in with algae and they're going, hey, we're going to turn the reflecting pool into an algae. Anyway. Institutions don't respond to trust failures by rebuilding trust. They respond by building guardrails, and the guardrails don't get removed when the crisis stops. 9/11 and taking your shoes off and not having liquids. TSA pre-check. As long as you're spending some money, Lynn can keep her shoes on and keep her laptop in her bag. But if you don't spend that $149, $199, then you poors, then you're going to have to take your shoes off. You're going to have to take your laptop out of your bag because God forbid, $199 is the through line between terrorists, non-terrorists. So the question I have for you, when you think about the processes that have been started, and you think about the processes in terms of the environment that you exist in, what do you believe it's costing us annually with respect to some of these things that we're doing?
$1.25.
Okay.
You said how much is it costing us?
This is costing you more
And you
than
said
$1.
yes, I guess $1.25.
But
I think
hold on, but the people that violate the trust are gone, most of them. Okay. But the people that are paying for the overhead of it is Lynn can make these rules, but Lynn is not the one that's going to be impacted by it. The people that are impacted by it most are the poors. The people that are impacted by it the least are the individuals that can afford to skip the lines, can afford to do a TSA pre-check and global entry or whatever else, or to be able to pay your tax attorney to be able to say that the algae was done by Lynn and the Vandals as opposed to your terrible business decisions.
so. There are a couple of costs that are outside of monetary costs. So there's a human cost, there's an emotional cost, and I think that when you think about the 5 rounds of interviews and then a project that you have to do and all of these things that you have to do to show that you're worthy of this job, even though you can circumvent a lot of that stuff and it means nothing, but whatever. There's a fear of speaking honestly about things. There's background checks. There's that contract between friends. So you don't just get a handshake. You have to have a contract. There's that fear of recommending someone. And I think you're right. When you look at the human cost and corporations are trying to hire safer candidates or fund established organizations, or they want to repeat the same old idea over and over and over again. Yeah, you're right. The newcomers, they're coming into the country, suffer. Entrepreneurs suffer. Young leaders suffer. Trying to change jobs suffer. Anybody that's outside of a traditional network suffers. And then you think about the emotional cost, right? People won't say the things that they want to say. So they'll stay silent on things because social media can amplify your voice and then take that soundbite and that becomes you. People choose acceptable over authentic. They avoid difficult conversations. We stay in jobs that we've outgrown. Like we could grow and we could change jobs, but they make it so challenging to do that now.
So there are things that have been put in place that I want you to think about that have been put in place that fundamentally change how Lynn shows up day in and day out. What political things do you believe have shown up that are impacting?
That's what I'm talking about, the interview. So the interview itself is a big deal.
Okay.
It used to be that you would meet with HR, the hiring manager, and the team. Ta-da, you're hired. Now I need you to meet with the cleaning crew, the person that occasionally does the catering. I need you to do a project that we will later implement, even if we don't hire you. Not just part of a project, but the entire thing. No, you're not getting free work from me. You have to go through all of these machinations just to be, well, you're one of two. Okay.
Yeah.
And then not only that, we're going to wait 2-3 weeks before we make a decision. Please stop. I do understand the Zoom because instead of flying a candidate out, you can do Zoom. Even though I think that Zoom, you know how I feel about Zoom. I love it, hate it.
But there's a difference between using Zoom to fly Lynn out, and I prefer face-to-face meetings. There's a reason that you do that because you want to see how people present themselves in a professional setting.
But let me challenge that.
We have so many freaking internal meetings that are Zoom-based meetings. And I'm talking about after the hiring process. Every meeting doesn't have to be on video. Used to be where you could have phone calls and you could just do a check-in in terms of, Lynn, what's going on with your day today? And it's a 20, 30-minute phone call. And you could take that phone call anywhere. I don't need you to be in your office on Zoom to have a video meeting with me.
Somebody somewhere did a TED Talk or a TikTok or something that said that's the way to establish human connection is looking them in the face on Zoom. You don't need to look at me. You could have sent me a text message. So I agree with you on that. But I also say that Zoom is helpful during the interview process because you do want to see how people present in different settings. How are you over Zoom? Because some meetings are internal and external that will be on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that it's important to meet that person in person.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times they are on Zoom and then you see them in person and you're like, where are they? Oh my God. Zoom filters are amazing. It's a hell of a drug.
Zoom filters. I will say this, that in some ways, I think companies have used Zoom as a stand-in for being in office, meaning that it used to be that if Lynn was in office, then I could have a quick meeting with her and know that she's actually working. I think sometimes companies are using Zoom for a trust factor. They don't trust.
That's the trust factor about your work ethic. It doesn't have anything to do about efficiency. It has nothing to do about human connections. It's because you, Mr. Manager, have some kind of complex that you need to know what your employees are doing 24 hours a day. My thing is, again, you gave them an objective. If they get it done, or if they get it done even well, why do you need to know how they're spending every single minute of their day? Because I promise you, in the office, like I said before, there were so many times where I had my girl group and we were just hanging out in an office talking about whatnot, so forth in the Bendigo. Like we were not working.
Okay, well, that makes sense. All right, so receipt number 2 in terms of politics is institutions stop optimizing for outcomes. So you think about our favorite store, Target, and how it is that Target typically used to ask the question, what is the right call? But Target then shifted to what is the defensible call? Those are not the same questions, meaning that with DEI, Target could have said, a lot of our customers are coming in and they look like Lynn. And the people that are on our shelves, they look like Lynn. And so these individuals are helping us generate revenue to keep the lights on and to be one of the top retailers in the country. But Target took the other approach and said, we have the shit show telling us that he's going to come down on us and rain on us like, whatever. And so from that standpoint, we're going to make a different decision. And we're going to say, from a defensive standpoint, we need to do this because we want to be in good graces of this administration. Wasn't the right call, but it was a defensible call for them. And I bring up Target because we now have one of the world's best rappers who's entered into a partnership with Target. And so now the question becomes, again, right call versus defensible call. And so the question I have for you is, how often do you, Lynn, make the right call versus the defensible call? And what is the litmus test that you use to determine which one it is?
May I ask a question? I probably should have clarified this before. When you're referring to Lynn, is she representing the average person or is she representing herself?
You're representing yourself because you're not average.
I don't give a shit what other people think. I'm going to make the call that's right for me.
Okay, so
that's my litmus test.
So it's not the right call, it's a defensible call.
Because here's the thing though, a defensible call, because I was thinking about like my kids. I can raise my kids according to my value or according to what won't be criticized. Because I'm not a spanker of children, so I didn't spank my kids. I was a talker and they were like, please shut up. I didn't spank them. And so in some circles, like my mom, why are you allowing them to say that? Why are you doing this? Because this is how I'm raising my children. And then if you think about you're building your career around purpose or avoiding risk, I think that's the only area that I do a risk assessment before making a move because there are so many people dependent on me financially. But when it's just me and I'm the only one impacted by it, couldn't care any less. Think about, are you sharing your opinions honestly or the opinions that feel socially safe? Obviously, I share my opinions honestly because here we are. I would say there's maybe 2 areas because I was also thinking about my life pre-divorce, that you think about Are you building a life that you believe in and that brings you joy and happiness, or one that you can explain? I've said this before, they probably shouldn't have gotten married, but that would have been an explanation. Like, you're just living with a partner, you're just having children. That wasn't a thing back in the day. Now it is a thing. And so you would have had to explain, well, I don't want to be married. I don't believe in marriage. I feel like it's a form of slavery. And so, again, my opinions. I wanted a committed partner and I wanted children, but I didn't want the pressures of that formalized legal marriage.
So, from a political standpoint, I think most of the time, as African American or minorities, we're typically on the right call side of the ledger.
I disagree
Let me finish. Meaning, if I'm a company and I'm looking to do a get out the vote campaign, okay? And Lynn is in Austin, Texas. And I know Lynn has the relationships to help get out the ground game in Austin, Texas, okay? The right call is to give Lynn the funding for her to be able to go out and do that. The defensible call would be there could be a national organization who says, hey, we've done get out to vote campaigns across the United States, and we can get you not only close to the numbers that Lynn can get you, but we'll also set you up for success in other states and other districts. That is a right call versus defensible call. Right call with respect to the culture is typically Lynn can be the most qualified person to do certain things. Okay? The right call is to support Lynn with respect to growing her business. The defensible call is instead of giving Lynn the opportunity, give Catherine the opportunity, because Catherine is a national brand and Catherine has shown that she can withstand X, Y, and Z. And Catherine has shown that she is going to be more advantageous for us down the road with respect to policy positions. So I stand by my argument that traditionally, Black folk, brown folk are going to be on the it's the right thing to do versus the defensible thing to do with how it is that politics may get made in terms of the decision.
Thank you for sharing that. So may I ask a couple of questions? You just talked about Target, correct?
Correct.
And is Dr. Jamal Bryant Black?
Yeah, he's frat, yes.
Would you think that he was of the culture?
Yes.
So the right call would be for him to have given Nikema Levy, is that her name, who's also Black, the platform and put all his resources into her. The defensible call, using your analogy, would be for him to use his platform, amplify it, and take it on as himself. Am I correct, sir?
The right call was him to elevate.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you literally just said a second ago in that same situation
let me
that was
finish,
the defensible call. So, counselor, which one do you want that to be? The defensible or the right? You can't keep switch one.
The right call was for him to lend his support to the elevation of what it is that the cause was about. And that's what he did. Now, you can have a separate justification for your congregation.
Is the separation clause, is that applied to the Kappas or or how do you get that separation, that clause in there, sir?
I'm just saying that, look, if you are upfront and honest and saying, okay, we need to support this sister with what she's doing. However, I'm going to take it a step further and say that my congregation is going
Did he say that, sir?
Yes, he did.
He said that. He said,
yes, he did.
This is what she's doing, and I'm going to take it a step further.
Yes,
Please
that's what he did.
provide the receipts on that, kind sir.
I will. I will gladly
as Exhibit A. Thank
you're not
you.
going to be taking shots at Fred. This is a no Kappa shot podcast.
I will pow pow all day long.
Anyway, so the third receipt with respect to politics is the credential arms race. Trust used to be portable. A credential carried it. Now the credential requires verification. The verification requires documentation. And the documentation requires a process. The credential is no longer the proof. It's the starting point of proving. For instance, you talked about your girlfriend, Cheyenne Bryant, and her degree inflation, where she was talking about the fact that she had this degree, this degree, this degree. Or you could see individuals who are talking about licensing in terms of expansion. the number of jobs that require them to have multiple licenses to be able to do certain things. Or we all have been a part of an organization where, in order for us, especially if you're in the field of education, medical, or legal profession, you have to continue to get certified. I know in real estate, you have to have those continuing ed credits that allow you to show that Lynn is an expert in X, Y, and Z. Or you love this because this is what you do. You do background checks on individuals. So the background normalization process, where the background check has moved from high security contacts to Lynn just want to do a background check on you to find out that you're not someone who is stalking the neighborhood. And so she can ask you on a date for a cup of coffee. So the question I have for you is, what credentials, Miss Lynn, are you holding or pursuing that exist to signal that you're a trustworthy individual rather than to build your capability?
Okay, so I'm going to back this up because I don't agree with your premise.
Okay.
And so there was this TV show that I used to watch when I was in college.
Matlock?
Yeah, Matlock. It was actually a news segment that my boyfriend and I used to watch when I was in college. It was hilarious. It was called Would You Help Me? Would You Help Me Now? And it was this segment where they had an attractive person, usually a woman, ask for help or ask for something or present herself or himself as something. And it was usually favorable. And they would say, would you help me? And then they would have a less conventionally attractive person do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I thought it was just hilarious because we would always say, would you help me? Would you help me now? But underneath it, I think that trust is just not equally distributed. It's just not. And so it can depend on your physical attractiveness, your race, your age, gender, accent, weight. All of those things factor into whether somebody is going to start to trust you.
I saw this maybe a couple weeks ago. Someone said this about Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. If she did not look the way she looked, would she have been able to get away with what she got away with, allegedly, for as long as she did?
I think it's a sad, sad thing, but I do not believe so. I don't. I think that because she is conventionally attractive, that she got bonus points. I can say this. So for a woman, unfortunately, we can be judged on what people find attractive. And then all of a sudden, either you're smarter or you're just an idiot. And all you have, at least you got your looks, because you've said that, at least you're pretty. And so thanks, John. But I think that does factor into it. And it's unfortunate. Obviously, the way you look, your age, your gender doesn't mean that you should trust them. Because people can manipulate that and take advantage of it, which apparently they do.
So the thing that I found very interesting about her with respect to all of that, after everything happened and she was exposed as possibly being a fraud, the videos that started coming out about her or that she was putting out had stripped away all of the professional, and she was twerking on a boat and just she was giving Megan Thee Stallion a run for her money. And I was like, that was very curious how it is when you feel attacked, you automatically resort to sexualization.
It was more of independence.
I don't know if it was a freedom aspect, but I will say this.
Well, I don't think that just because someone's expressing themselves and they want to wear whatever they wear, a spa towel, or they want to twerk.
Are you feeling attacked?
Absolutely not. But I think that putting that label on it, that's another problem, right? Mm-hmm. And so you automatically assumed that it was sexual exploitation.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you're twerking on a boat and all we see is just booty, 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 booty.
Why is that there's body shaming?
I'm not body shaming.
And you're sexualizing her. Her body is not there for your entertainment.
Actually it is.
It is literally not.
It was the way she presented it.
No, it's not. I don't care if I walk outside buck naked. That gives you no right to do anything. That's how I came into this world. And for you, that's a you problem.
Okay. Well, maybe, possibly.
No, it is, Kappa.
So, what is up with you taking shots at Kappas?
If you go sit there in a Target, you're going to get shot at, brother. We live in Texas.
So we make the pivot to edutainment. You are a big fan of sequels. And so the first receipt for edutainment is the sequel economy. I call it them being lazy. I mean, you have so many sequels that are coming out now or rehashing of movies that came out 30, 40 years ago. Or you have individuals that are putting out songs that were 30 years ago. And I had to catch myself because I said, okay, hell, the songs that we were listening to 30 years ago, they were rehashing music that came out a generation before. So we're no different. So the question is this. Studios used to greenlight original movies and original ideas. Now they greenlight existing audiences. They're not trying to bring in different audiences. They're trying to get Lynn to come back and give them more money on what it is that Lynn has shown that she likes to see. So the shift wasn't created, it was financial. The original IP requires audiences to discover it. The existing IP comes with an audience already attached. So when studios stopped trusting audience to define new things, they started paying to borrow the certainty from the past. So the question I have for you, Ms. Lynn, is what would you be building right now, other than your twerk video, if you trusted the audience enough to introduce them to something new outside of the podcast?
I would not be building anything because I think that a lot of different industries and studios are lazy and they do rely on the same old formula. Now, there are some interesting things that are coming out and that have come out that I find intriguing. And this actually happened this year. The original things that are coming out. A lot of times Apple TV will come out with something that really pushes the audience and opens it up to someone else. Netflix to some degree, so it's more of the streaming entities as opposed to those big studios that just do the same cookie cutter over and over again. For me, it's not that I would do anything different because I don't know. That's just not my jam. I do what I want to do.
Okay. But at the same time, the fact is you have audiences that like what they like. You like certain things. And so because you like certain things, you're going to more than likely be supportive of going back and viewing those things. That's why you watch multiple seasons of an episode. That's why you go out and you watch your movies that are part of a franchise. That's the reason that franchises are successful. I don't have to invest in another IP if I know that Lynn is going to be watching 8 episodes of the Green Lantern, or Lynn is going to be watching what's the new show that came out?
DC? I don't think so.
Well, the new show that came out on HBO, The House of Dragon.
Yeah, I didn't watch. I told you that I broke up with that franchise because of the last season of the Game of Thrones.
But there are individuals that will be watching it because
of course they were. I mean, look at The Walking Dead. Walking Dead, LA, Walking Dead, Texas, The Walking Dead. Like, no, after they got rid of Carl, like, no, thank you. I don't watch this anymore.
Yeah, but you're a special case anyway.
No, I'm not. I have friends that are the same way, that they just don't. If something happens, they're just like, I'm not going to watch this anymore. I don't watch the franchise. I don't have loyalty like that. There are things that I do like, but one of the things that I really like is to be surprised. I'm not like you. I love surprises. That's why I prefer to watch rom-coms on Netflix as opposed to the Hallmark Channel. Because on Netflix, it's surprise that you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the twist is. You never know what that love story is going to look like. On the Hallmark Channel, it's the same old thing. They just have this different people, different settings, different sweater on. But it's the same thing, and it's boring to me.
Okay, that's fair. So receipt number 2 in terms of edutainment is the test audience, and they test everything. They can't put out a new cookie unless they get Lynn to do a sample of that cookie. They can't do a new show because they need to know that Lynn's going to watch that show. I know that you were, or at least you used to be, a part of, I don't know if it was movies or something, where you got advanced screenings of certain things so you could rate them. And so from that standpoint, where you're having those screenings, where you have the alternative endings, if Lynn did not like the last episode of Game of Thrones, there was another ending that she could have watched. Reshoots are driven by test scores. So you can a la carte and you can curate your experience. So the question I have for you is, where is Ms. Lynn paying to confirm what she already knows? Or where are you paying confirmation on what you want to see versus where it is that the creative may be going?
That was the most convoluted question.
It's not It is not a compliment because you like to curate your endings. You like to curate your experiences.
I don't like to curate my experience. I just said I like to be surprised.
You like to be surprised by some things.
The only thing I don't like to do.
Hold on. How can you say you like surprises when you literally just said you did not like the Game of Thrones ending? You know why? Because
Okay, it was a surprise. It sucked.
Bullshit.
Okay, so I like the surprise, but you suck. I like good surprises.
No, you did not like the surprise because, as you said, you'd read the book.
But he never wrote the last book, so how would I know what it was? He never wrote that 7th book, so how in the world would I have known it? I don't know this guy. I didn't sit with him over coffee. He never wrote it.
But you don't like things that don't skew toward what is already on the written paper.
Okay, there was nothing on the written paper for me to have a
This is beyond Game of Thrones. Anything that does not, you have a tendency. I'm going to call you out on this. You have a tendency, if it's not aligned with what is on the written paper, you take issue with it.
Okay, so there are two things here. If there was a contract, formal, informal, whatever type of contract, there's an agreement between two people, a person in a company, two people, whatever. And then one person changed the scope of work or they change elements in that contract. No, I'm not a fan of that. I am absolutely not a fan of that. If you change it to your advantage and you don't take into account me or you don't have a conversation with me and you unilaterally change a contract, yeah, I have a problem with it.
But anything with art is creative and it's the vision of the creative.
Okay, fine. But here's the thing. It's two separate things and you're not making a great argument. It's just sad for me. Like everybody watching this show, they're surprised. Like, what the hell? It's just not good. So let me help you. I'm going to put the guardrails back on. If a creative has the options to create the journey for the audience, and so whatever is in their head, that's going to be the journey. You can like it or you don't like it. But unless you read a book and it's on the paper and they deviate it from the book, it's whatever they come up with. It's always going to be a surprise. Even if they did a variation of a book, we know now it could be a surprise because they just say based on this book. It's not a representation of the entire book. So no matter what a creative does, it's going to be a surprise. And I like that. I like the surprise, the verb surprise. I may not like the outcome of it.
No, I disagree with that.
Well, you can't disagree, John, because first off, you're not me and you cannot say how I feel. You can't.
I can, and
You can't? How can help me, sir? How can you do that?
Because you're being a hypocrite. You're saying that, okay, you can't enjoy the creative process and not let the creative do what that creative wants to do, even if you don't agree with it. It's okay.
What I do, I let them agree, but I may not agree with the outcome. Okay. The process I'm fine with. The outcome, I may say, you know what? You baked this cake and you used, I don't know, you used rosemary oil. And I'm like, wow, that was an interesting choice. I don't like this. I don't like the outcome, but I celebrate your creativity. I celebrate the fact that you wanted to do a surprise. The outcome was, for me, not good.
Do you think that you are a feel person, meaning by going off how you feel about something, versus an analytics person?
Well, yeah, because I know. I have signs and I can feel your energy. And I know this.
So the third receipt for edutainment is the analytics replaced taste. What that means is streaming platforms have access to a lot of information. We have a lot of information that's available to us on this YouTube channel. We know what thumbnails work, what titles are going to be more clickable when you guys are spiking in terms of viewing or listening versus dropping off. And so from that, one of the things that you have to protect against is not being so driven by analytics that you lose the feel for what makes something works. And so from that standpoint, Ms. Lynn, the question I have for you is, when you think about your life, where has analytics replaced judgment? And what did you stop doing when those metrics did not support what it was that you had opted to do, meaning the decision that you made?
In a couple of different areas. First, we talked about me being a young leader. I was all touchy-feely, not in an inappropriate HR way, with my employees. It's all like if they were like, well, my dog died. I'm like, oh my God, your dog died. Let me bake you a cake. And they're not getting their work done. And then at the end of it, I'm like, wow, we didn't make our number or our goals because I was too busy having the virtual emotional handshake with you instead of looking at analytics to drive our work. I think there's a balance between that, but I think that in settings like that, it's imperative for the employee, for the company, for everyone to rely on metrics, measurable, smart metrics. And then personally, I would love to talk about my rubric. I think it's important when you're in a relationship, whatever that relationship is, to have expectations. And I think that whatever those expectations are, like we talked about boundaries, these are my boundaries, these are my expectations, and then measuring those instead of not being honest, open, and transparent about what you want, what you expect, what you're willing to compromise. And then you get into this situation where there's resentment because you never had anything that you can measure and talk about and correct.
So I would say this with respect to the edutainment aspect, that when you use metrics, it's important not to over-index and over-course correct what it is that you may be doing or what it is that you may be feeling is going to work. You have to go with your gut on certain things. It's okay to have data be instructive, but not be so data driven that you lose the soul of it. Otherwise, we become, as you say, robots.
I'm saying there's a balance. It's a balance, and you have to keep making adjustments and doing a temperature check on that balance and making sure that it is netting the result that you want. But being a robot is not effective, efficient, or helpful. And then being kumbaya, my lord, is obviously not helpful, efficient, and whatever else I said.
And so you have to have the balance of the feeler and the analytics.
And I think that having some type of rubric, whether you call it a rubric or not, actually puts those in there because you put in different domains. And so you look at those hard skills, those hard things, and then you look at the soft skills. At a job, you look at how empathetic they are, whatever. Even in a relationship, you're still measuring different things. Did you, we share these chores. Have you done those things? Also, do we make time for one another? Are we checking in with one another? Are we having those emotional connections? So you have both. Whether you're calling it a rubric or whatever you are calling it, you have domains that will account for each one of those areas, the logistical, the emotional, and then you have measurements along the way where you can make adjustments, give attaboys, whatever you need to do at that particular point. But it has to be communicated, it has to be transparent, and it has to be agreed upon by both parties, in my opinion.
I agree, and I take your point there. All right.
Oh, thank you. Can you say that a little bit louder? Because that was a little low, Kappa.
All right. So what do you have planned for this week?
Not a lot. The boys are back in town. I believe we're going to go see, what is that show? Supergirl? We're going to go see that. And then we're supposed to have date night where we're watching Project Hail Mary again. Well, I watched it and I read the book, but the boys haven't seen it. So they said that they were going to watch it with me. Sometimes it's a negotiation where the youngest is like, I'll give you 15 minutes. I'm like, damn, dude, the movie's like 2 hours.
Wow.
It's going to take us forever to do that. What about you?
Contractor.
Oh, yes. I hope that everything works out well for you. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
That's all right. All right, guys. Thanks again for spending time with us. So what's the point? The point is that most people think that trust is a moral issue, a character issue, or a cultural issue. People don't trust like they used to. Institutions aren't trustworthy anymore. Society has become more skeptical. All of that may be true, but I think we're missing the most important story here. The most important story is what distrust costs us. Because trust was never just a feeling. Trust was infrastructure. Trust was a shortcut. Trust was the invisible system that allowed everything else to move faster. A recommendation was enough. A handshake was enough. A reputation was enough. A conversation was enough. A relationship was enough. Trust absorbs work, trust absorbs uncertainty, it absorbs friction. And when trust disappears, the need doesn't disappear. The trust just moves. Now you do the research. You read the reviews. You compare the ratings. You document the conversation. You verify the credentials. You hire the service. You pay the subscription. Now you carry the overhead that the relationship, the institution, or the community used to carry for you. That's the trust tax. And what's fascinating is that most of us don't experience it as a tax. We experience it as a part of normal life. Of course you check the reviews. Of course you need references. Of course you need another approval, another form, another password, another certification, another platform, another subscription. We've become so accustomed to the friction that we stop noticing it. But friction is still a cost. Every hour spent verifying is an hour not spent building. Every dollar spent replacing a relationship is a dollar invested somewhere else. Every layer of process slows the system down, and every layer of protection increases overhead. And eventually, you wake up in a world where everyone feels exhausted, but no one can quite explain why. Because they're not carrying one large burden. They're carrying 1,000 small ones. The extra form, fee, approval, verification, precaution, step. The tax isn't crushing because it's massive. The tax is crushing because it's constant. And here's the part I think matters most. So this episode is not an argument for blind trust. Some systems needed more accountability. Some relationships deserved more scrutiny, and some institutions earned the skepticism they received. That's not the question. The question is whether we've stopped noticing what the replacement costs, because every society has to decide where the burden lives. Does the institution carry it? Does the community carry it? Does the relationship carry it? Or does Lynn carry it? And increasingly the answer seems to be Lynn carries it. All of us carry it. Doing more work just to reach the same level of certainty is not something that we can continue to do. It's not what's going to allow us to have the time, energy, and flexibility to live productive lives. That's why the trust tax matters. Because eventually, the cost of distrust isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in energy. It's measured in bandwidth. It's measured in how much effort it takes just to move through ordinary life. And if enough friction gets installed into enough systems, people stop building, not because they lack ambition, not because they lack talent, not because they lack opportunity, but because they're exhausted from paying overhead all day. So maybe the real question isn't whether trust is declining. Maybe the real question is, how much of your life do you now spend paying for things trust used to provide for free? And if you've added that bill up honestly, what would it cost you? While you're out and about this week, make the time to do something nice for yourself. And while you're at it, take the time to do something nice for someone else. Until next time, we'll talk to you.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening and spending your time with us on I Take Your Point. For more unfiltered conversations like this, click the link in the description. Huge thank you to our production team. We couldn't do this without you. Quick disclaimer, the views shared are those of the host and guest and are for informational purposes only, not professional advice. Keep building your own table, take care, and be well.